Welcome to Grammar 4K. In this booklet, we're going to go over verb tenses and forms. We're going to go over adverbs modifying adjectives, and then we're also going to diagram adverbs describing adjectives. A lot of this is going to be review or further application of what you already know. So let's jump right into it with verb tenses and verb forms. If you have your booklet, open it up to the front inside cover where we have our first explanation. And once again, this is just kind of a review. We know that each verb tense is a form that expresses the time of the action or state of the verb. And remember that we've also gone over tenses and forms with regular and irregular verbs. When you have a verb form that has a helping verb like perfect and progressive, that helping verb must agree with the subject. So always remember that whenever you're working with helping verbs. If you look into the next section, we go over the simple tenses, which you might have forgotten a little bit about, but sometimes a verb will just be in past, present, or future. It won't have any other form attributed to it. So please don't forget about those. We have examples with to travel and to drink, a regular and an irregular verb, and then after that, we also give you examples of those same verbs and the different tenses and forms, progressive and perfect. So in this booklet, we're about to go over what you're going to do, but essentially just make sure that you're following the general rules and guidelines of the different tenses and forms. And of course, we do provide reference material in the back of the book as to how to conjugate for the perfect form, because that can be kind of tricky. But just remember what you've already learned, essentially. So now let's look at an activity that we're going to be doing in this booklet. And this is the only verb form, verb phrase activity you're going to be doing in Grammar 4K, but we'll be bulking it up throughout the rest of this series. So get used to this activity. You'll be seeing it a lot over the next few booklets. The directions start with you double underlining the verb and verb phrase. Please do this. Don't make this the reason you get these wrong. It's such an easy task, and it's going to help you so much to identify the next part of the activity. So always double underline your verb or verb phrase. Next, we'll ask you to label the correct tense and form on the line. Notice and form is in parentheses because, like I said, sometimes it's just going to be the simple tenses, past, present, future. So make sure that one, you're double underlining so you know what the verb is, and then two, just make sure you're understanding the difference between past and past perfect, etc. So let's go ahead and do the first one together. We have Winslow is running to the park. What is Winslow doing? He's running. Exactly. So we have a progressive form, so is our helping verb because that is agreeing with the subject. So we're going to double underline our verb phrase, is running, and we are going to identify that as present progressive. Notice that I double underlined, I wrote my tense and form, and I spelled the tense and form correctly. If you want to use abbreviations, that is fine. You must abbreviate appropriately and punctuate appropriately. So either way, just make sure you're writing it correctly. And like I said, this is what you're going to be doing throughout this booklet. So it will get pretty straightforward pretty quickly if it isn't already. Now we're going to go over adverbs. So we've already gone over a lot of information about adverbs. We already know that adverbs are describing words, and they're not just describing words for verbs, they're also describing words for adverbs. And now we're going to add one more thing on top of that. An adverb can also describe an adjective. So an adverb is a lot of different things. And when you have an adverb that describes an adjective, just like when it describes an adverb, we call them to what extent adverbs. And that's the question that they answer. To what extent is this other word describing another word? So to what extent is this adjective or is this adverb describing the adjective? Common to what extent adverbs are rather, to, very, so, quite, somewhat, as, really, and almost. And by saying common to what extent adverbs, I'm essentially saying, hey, these are the words to look for adverbs that will answer to what extent other words are describing other words. So there are plenty of other to what extent adverbs, but these are the ones we're going to focus in on a lot in this booklet. So Now we're going to look at the examples underneath that. We have the dress is very pretty. So pretty is a PA. It's a predicate adjective. It's describing the dress in the predicate. Very is describing how pretty or to what extent the dress is pretty. So that is going to be an adverb in this sentence. Notice it's not describing the verb, it's describing an adjective. The next one is similar. A rather loud bird lives nearby. Now in this, we actually have two adverbs. Nearby is describing where the bird lives. It's describing where the action is taking place. However, rather is also an adverb because it's telling you to what extent the bird is loud. So just make sure you understand that they are two adverbs, but they do different things. They're functioning two different ways. So it's pretty straightforward once you get into it. You just have to go slow, be detail oriented, and you should have no issues whatsoever. And now to practice a little bit more with it, we're going to go over sentence diagramming with these adverbs. So we have the sentence, the really colorful bird was flying low to the ground. The first thing we want to do whenever we come to a sentence and we think we are not sure where to get started, we need to see if there are any prepositional phrases and essentially eliminate those. So in this sentence, we have to as a preposition and ground as the OP. The describing word for ground is the, so we're going to mark that as well. So now we know none of the important words are going to be in that part of the sentence. Now we can look at our subject and verb because that is most important for identifying other parts of the sentence as well. So bird is our subject. Was flying is our verb phrase. Notice it's past progressive. And then we have colorful describing bird. Really is describing to what extent the bird is colorful. And of course, the is also a describing word for bird. And then we have one more word. It's also a describing word. Low. Low is describing where the bird is flying. It's another adverb. So now we can start on our diagram and creating that. We have one long line and we are splitting it into two parts. Notice that we don't have a direct object, we don't have a PA or a PN, so we have no other line on there that is above the line, but we do have a lot of describing going on in here. So first we have our prepositional phrase to ground, and then we have a describing word going off that OP. And then of course we have a describing word for bird, we have a second describing word, and then off of that we have our adverb. Notice how this looks exactly like what we've already done, an adverb describing an adverb. It's just an adverb describing an adjective because that initial diagonal line is coming off of the subject, which is going to be a noun. So really a very similar diagram to what we've already made. And then of course we have one other describing word, and that's going to be right there attached to the verb. So now we can start filling it in. We've got bird was flying. That's the core of our sentence. That's what makes this a sentence, a subject and a verb. And then of course we've got our prepositional phrase, which is to ground, to the ground at least. And then we can start filling in our other describing words. So we have the bird was flying, and then we have the colorful bird, but it's not just a colorful bird, it's a really colorful bird. Really is describing colorful. Remember that colorful is describing bird, really is describing colorful. You cannot switch those. You can't have colorful below really, because that won't make sense. And that's not what the sentence is telling you. So always make sure you're writing it in the correct order of what is being described. And then of course we have our adverb low telling you where the bird was flying. And that's going to be the sentence diagram for this sentence. Hopefully it made sense. Hopefully, like I said, this is a lot of review and just application of what you already know. But if you do have any questions or concerns, please contact the person who grades your grammar at your Gideon Center.